Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all of my other videos. Hello YouTube and welcome back to the channel. I decided to do a little tutorial today. We're going to create a thumbnail. Now I have, as you can see here, like kind of a template set up. This document that's open is a Photoshop document, which allows layering and manipulation of the images. Whereas if you were to open up a JPEG, a regular picture that you find on the internet, whether it's a JPEG or a GIF, that's not going to allow you to manipulate the image. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to actually bring up a JPEG image and kind of show you a little bit of what I mean, right? So this is a JPEG. Now, this was created in Photoshop by me. The big difference here is there's two big differences, right? One being this has a white background, which can automatically tell you right then and there it's a JPEG image. JPEG images do not have transparent backgrounds, so if you ever save something and you go to open it up in Photoshop and it has a white background, then that is not the kind of file that you need. And I'm going to explain to you the big differences, right? So here, if I go and I take this image, right, with this tool, which I believe is the move tool. Some of the tools I don't remember the name of them. Uh Only because I kind of just do it. Just bear with me on that. Okay, so if I go and I drag this file, right, over to here, it's going to come out like this. I can't manipulate duality's reality, not without removing the background. However, delete that real quick. I have a fix for that. So, what you do is when you create something, right? Now, this is that same image, that same text, okay? But now it has no white background. The reason for that is because this is saved as a PNG file, okay? Now, if I go and I drag this and bring it over here, now it gives me no background. Now I can manipulate just this image, right? But now let's say you want to get a little more in depth. Let's delete that again, right? So now, as you see here, you have all these little icons and the wording, right? Now, if I want to manipulate just these, right, I would have to find the layer. So, for instance, this duality, wild duality layer, there's 3 on here. So I'm not sure which one this is going to actually move. Okay, so it moved the first one, which is perfect. Having a PSD document, a Photoshop document, so like if you're using Procreate, for instance, right, on an iPad, and you want to manipulate the image a little more, you want to maybe edit some coloring or throw some kind of a, color filter over it or something, you would want to export that image as a PSD file, and it will bring up all the layers that you have within Procreate. Okay, I learned that with a friend of mine the other day. We were messing around. He needed help with something, and I was able to do it that way with him. So you have your PSD document, which is going to allow you manipulation of every single element within the image that you want to create. So now again, if I go and I open that file, that PNG file, right? And I drop that in here, okay? I have a new layer. It created a new layer for that image. Now within that, if I decide, hey, maybe I don't like this font, right? But I want to maybe use it for something else later, I can always just do that. I can just hit this little I, and it basically hides it. It's still there. I don't have to re-import the image. It's still within the document, but I can now shut it on and off. As you see here, I have other things that, because this template, this PSD document template was from my stream intro screens. I'm going to actually create the thumbnail for this video, right? Which is going to be called Photoshop for Noobs. So, what I'm going to do is I want to copy all this, right? So now what I need to do is I need to find all these little tiny icons, which are going to show up in this little corner here, right? Which are going to show up here. But I can't see that because they're so small. So this is a 1920 by 1080 image, right? Which is a full screen resolution on a computer or your television at this point. I have to find out which layer controls which circle, which, like I said, is going to be difficult to find because there's so many layers and there's so many elements that I have to kind of sift through. So now we know that this layer here, layer 3, controls that circle. So now we want to highlight that, right? So we highlight it. Highlighting is super important. If you don't highlight the layer and you think that you're working on it, you'll end up moving something that you don't want to move. So now I want to find the other one. So now I have to kind of sift through it, right? I can shut that one off. Okay, so that's that one. If you hold Control and click on the layer, not this, you want to make sure you highlight that layer. I've controlled clicked on the layer, and now I have 2 layers selected. So now I need to find the third one, which I believe is this one. If you go and you click the eye icon, the visibility, right? It doesn't highlight the layer. So now again, you want to control click. If you click and then try to do control, it's not going to work. It's going to deselect the other layers that you have. So now I have these 3 layers. So now I have all 3 of these little circles. Okay. Now I need the 3 wild dualities, right? So 1, 2, 3. Now, that is control click on all 3 of those layers. So now I'm going to take my move tool and I'm going to drop this into this document. And you're probably thinking, why are you using a different document? There's a reason for that. The reason being is this is a thumbnail, right? So this is if you go to image size, you can always see what size your image is. It has it in width and height, in inches, and it has it in pixels. This is a 1280 by 720 document. So it's smaller, which is why when I brought this over, now the text and the circles look bigger, right? So now what I want to do is I want to kind of shrink that down because I want more room to kind of work with my text. In this document, it still has all those layers selected. So now if I go and hit Control T, now it's collecting everything as a group, right? Control T is your transform tool. Now there's 2 different ways you can do transform. You can do it freeform, which is going like this. You can stretch it, right? Or if you stretch it, right, and you let go, you now have this image to work with that's all stretched. But if you make a mistake, right, if you stretch something out, okay, you can go back once. So to undo it once, you're going to go Control Z, right? Control Z is going to either go backward or forward. But now, if you deselect this by hitting Enter and you hit Control Alt Z, kind of gives you more options, right? So now, if I want to make this smaller without distorting the image, I can grab the corner, right? I can stretch it out like this. But if I hit Shift, it's going to automatically keep it in proper form. So now if I shrink this down, we're going to move it over a bit because I want it kind of center. And if you shift click in the box, it's kind of snapped to a grid. So now I'm going to hit enter. Now your image, when you move it and you make it smaller, it might look a little distorted. It might look a little pixelated. Once you hit enter, it'll bring it back into its proper form. So now we have this. The only elements that were in this Photoshop document to start with initially were just this layer here, which is the brick background. So what I did initially, because I didn't show you guys, I went to new, right? I already had my 1280 by 720. I hit enter, but I'm not going to do that now because I don't want to make a new document. Your background content, you have transparent, background color, or white. I always go with transparent because then if for whatever reason I say, hey, I don't know if I like this. I think I just want to maybe save this text here, right? I can shut the visibility off of the brick layer. And now if I saved just this as a PNG, I'll probably crop it and make the image size smaller. When I save it, I'll save it as a PNG. And then that's going to allow me to do what I did before with the duality's reality image. It's going to bring in just this. No white background, no color background, just the text that you want to bring in. So now I need to make my lettering, right? I need to, write out what the name of my video is. So here, what I'm going to do also, select the text color. Okay? Typically my text color is, or up here, is usually blue. Hence why in here you saw, in this image, you saw that as blue. Which I actually, you know what, I might keep that. I might make it a brighter blue, actually. So what we're going to do, we're going to click that little color palette icon. I can manipulate the colors here. Or if there's a color within the document that I like, I can just click on it with the eyedrop tool. That automatically pops up when you open the color palette. So now I have the blue color selected, which is what it was selected already. But so now I'm going to type in my text, which is going to be Photoshop for Noobs. Now, I don't necessarily like this font, right? If I want to make this bigger, I'll highlight here without clicking anywhere else. You highlight. If you go anywhere else on the image and you see this this arrow, then if you click somewhere else, it's going to deselect the text. Once you have your little cursor here, your little type cursor, then you know that you can type. Oops. Highlight here. If you click up here in this little section here, and then use your arrow key, you can slowly make the font bigger. So now we're going to move this over a little bit. Now, I don't know if I like that font, right? It's typically the font that I do use, but in this case, I don't know that I want it to look like that today. So what I might do is maybe I'll mess with something. That's a little too hard to read. That's more like graffiti-ish. I have different fonts, which you can download and install fonts from the internet and then use them in Photoshop. But now if I wanted to do something like that, Pure Evil, no, I don't know if I like that one either. You have that one, no. Now don't worry if when you go and you click on another font, if it's too small or it's too big, you can always manipulate it after. But we'll see. So now we have Photoshop for Noobs, right? So now if you double click on the text here, it's going to select it so you can rename the layer. If you double click a little to the side off of that, it brings up a whole plethora of things that you can use. Okay. I usually put bevel and emboss, right, which puts a little texture to it. And then I also add a little more texture with this by selecting this. Now, this is always going to be set, for whatever reason, Photoshop automatically defaults to the depth at plus 100, which is why it looks so scaly and stuff. So now I usually highlight that and just hit 0. Okay. Now, if I shut this off, it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference, right? But now maybe I want to put 10. Or maybe I want to put, let's say, 50. Now we're starting to see a little bit of a difference, right? So maybe we'll go 35. There's a little bit of texture there. If I put a stroke to it, right? Now it kind of highlights the areas and gives it a little bit of a different color, right? So now maybe I want to make the stroke pink. Now, I have the stroke as pink. Got a little bit of texture. I kind of like how this looks, but I'm going to lower the size a bit. So now to do that, I just click in here. Once the cursor is blinking in here, just hit your arrow key. See, now I don't like that font. I changed my mind. I'm sorry. I don't like that font. So I changed the font because I didn't necessarily like it. I didn't think it didn't fit well. So now if we go and do what I did before, now it didn't take it because I canceled it. It didn't take the bevel and emboss and the texture and stroke. Now you can manipulate this, right? You can, maybe you want it a little less, like, I'll show you, if you go higher, that's kind of like what it looks like. It'll spread the size out so where you don't really see that it's been changed. It'll just look like regular text. Like if I go all the way up, right, it just looks like the regular text because it's spread out so far that it doesn't make a difference. So now if I go back down, maybe I want it at like 4 seems good. I like that. Soften. Soften does almost the same thing. Like if you want to just maybe take a little bit of the edge off, but then you're back to the same thing. I don't ever use soften. I really don't ever manipulate this. You can do pillow emboss, which kind of looks a little cool, I'm not gonna lie. So if you want to make it look like it's engraved, like it's kind of etched into like the wall, that's where you change the direction. You see, it's where the texture is going to come into. Is it going to come in pointing outward or inward? So we're going to keep it up for now because I kind of like that. I am going to put a stroke in here though. We're going to do the pink just to kind of make it pop a little more. And we're going to drop this down a bit because it's a little bright and it's a little overwhelming. Now let's see if we go. Ooh, that looks good. I like that. It has all the color elements that I typically use. So now we hit OK. Now it accepts it. I have the text laid out, but now I need to figure out what I want to put here. I was thinking of putting a Photoshop icon. So then I said, well, I could put a Photoshop icon in, and it'll be easy enough to make. However, do I want to make it, or do I want to just import a photo? I'm going to make it myself. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a rounded rectangle tool, right? You have your rectangle tool, rounded, ellipse tool, polygon tool. So now all these you can kind of make different shapes with, right? Make that. The ellipse tool kind of makes like a circle, right? Which is how that the Gemini symbol came about. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the rounded rectangle tool, and we're going to create a box. Now you see, makes it like that, right? But now what I want to do is I want to create something that kind of looks like this. So we want another outline. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back into Photoshop. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the fill, and we're going to put in a stroke color. Now if we make that more and deeper, it changes the stroke of it, right? So now what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to make this smaller because that's ridiculous. So now we're going to make this, we're going to go 10. Right. So now we're going to make another rounded rectangle tool. Okay. We're going to have no stroke. Open the color palette so that we can get our eyedrop tool. Okay. If you move it from where it's positioned now, that's why they're layers, right? So if you have something that's over a layer that you want visible, you want to drop it down, and then it becomes visible. This is also very bright, right? So we're going to take this one. We're kind of going to raise the stroke a bit. Maybe even make the stroke pink. Maybe just to kind of offset some of the coloring. Because you also have to remember, you have to make sure that what you're doing is appealing to the eyes, right? Kind of maneuver it a bit. Now we're going to use that same font type, and we're going to type in P and S. Now you can't see it because it's a different color. So we're going to make the color pink. We're going to raise the font size. We're going to drop it in here. So now I want to manipulate this a little bit more, right? I want to add some texture to that, right? So we have texture. We're going to make it 0, right? Because it's got a little bit of a fill to it, right? So we're also we're gonna make this layer, this blue layer, we're gonna make it a little bit smaller, which is fine. Make it smaller, move it, right? We're also gonna give this some texture too. We're gonna do bevel again. So now it kind of looks multi-layered. Now we need to work on our PS layer. Actually, you know what? I don't like that font either. I'm changing the font. It's okay in an image like this to have it stretched out. I might make this whole thing smaller towards the end. So now we're gonna give that a bevel. Okay. We're gonna mess with it like we did before. We'll give this a little bit of a stroke. It's added a lot more depth. Darken. Okay, we'll use darken. That's fine. We're gonna add some texture to this background. So now I feel like it's less plain this way. Now we can kind of change that. Yeah, so I kind of feel like it adds a little bit more depth to the image, right? So now what I want to do is I need to select these 3 layers and then transform them, kind of make it a little bit smaller. Now with these 3 layers selected, I'm going to move this way. it's very bright here and not so much here, and I feel like it's overshadowing. So now what I want to do is I want to fix that, right? And it's okay to take your time. Don't ever try to rush through something because you're just going to end up aggravating yourself in the long run. So now I want to make this maybe a brighter blue. There we go. Not my typical color scheme, but for this instance, it pops more, right? So I like this. I feel like this is good, right? So now I'm pretty sure I'm done with this. I want to go to File, Save As. Photoshop is automatically going to want to save it as a PSD document, which is perfect because that's what you want. Always save your PSD documents so that way if you ever do want to like go back and say, "Oh, I'm doing another Photoshop tutorial. Let me manipulate this image so I don't have to start from scratch." So we're going to call this Photoshop for Noobs YT YouTube thumbnail PSD. Now we're going to go into Save As again. A lot of people used to use Save for Web. I don't like Save for Web. I hate Save for Web. I feel like it degrades the image way too much. So what I do, especially nowadays, there's no limitation on what you can upload to a website or only like if you're told that you need to have something that's like 2.5 megabytes, then fine, save for web if you need a smaller file size. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, right? Because I kind of want to I want it to kind of pop more. Another option that you can do is you can completely edit this entire thing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply. I'm going to remove that. What I did was I removed that so that I can manipulate the text individually. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate layer, Photoshop copy. I'm going to bring this down. I'm using Shift and the arrow keys to bring this down. Now I'm going to edit this text again, right? Or now we're going to do that again. Duplicate layer, right click, duplicate layer, Shift arrow keys, Noobs. I have the option to manipulate this entire image. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to always set your bottom text first, right? You can maybe make it bigger. Now, your next layer. Now, the 4 doesn't need to be that big, right? So we're going to make it a little bit bigger, right? Like I said, take your time with your image. Don't rush it because you'll find that when you take your time, you're much more satisfied with your project. So now, again, I'm holding Shift and maneuvering this. Okay, so now it's bigger. So now Photoshop is a little small, so we're going to make that a little bit bigger, right? So now we have that. And now we're going to move 4 up just a little smidgen. And then maybe we'll make Noobs a bit bigger. Again, Shift. Okay, perfect. But now I feel like there's too much room here. So we're going to take the layers that we imported before. Control Control, 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 control. Now we'll drop this down just a bit, right? Now, you don't have to take the time like I do. The reason I take my time is because I kind of want everything to look like it's not just thrown together. I kind of feel like 4 should be moved over a bit more. Maybe even move over noobs a bit. Align the O's, maybe. So now we'll move each of these over. Because we just moved everything a little to the left. Now we'll move the rest of the image to the right. And that's it. I believe that's it. I think we're done. If you find that you don't want to work with this as individual layers, because right now it's currently 3 layers, right? What you can always do, you can link these layers, but once you do that, you're not going to be able to edit them individually. So I usually kind of keep everything. That's why in my documents I usually have like 100 layers, because if I ever decide I want to manipulate something, I can. So now that we're done, if I wanted to create another document, right? I would go to new, right? There's my image size, 1280 by 720, transparent background as always. I can take elements from this PSD document and carry it over. I can select Photoshop for Noobs, the 3 layers. Control, click on the layer, carry this over. And the cool part is it doesn't mess with the layer on this document. It doesn't move anything. It just maneuvers it over to here. Now it comes in, and it comes in as individual layers. So now if I want to go and say, I want to make, I want to change that to 4, the number 4, Photoshop for Noobs. I can do that. So we're going to close this because I'm not using it. But that's our thumbnail. Now, I like the way everything kind of looks here. I'm satisfied with this entire project. Now we're going to go to Save As again. And we're going to do Save As PNG. It's going to come up with the same file name that you used for the PSD document, because that's what it's based off of, right? Because the original document now is Photoshop for Noobs, YouTube thumbnail PSD. So now we're going to edit this a bit, because now we want to differentiate the two. All right. So I think we are done. I hope that this little tutorial is helpful and gives you some ideas. One of the things that I've learned about watching YouTube videos for tutorials and such is don't be afraid to make it your own. You don't have to necessarily follow what the person is doing, because you have the luxury of pausing and saying, okay, well, let me try this, let me try that. A key thing to remember is you can always go backwards. You can always go Control Z or Control Alt Z. Control Alt Z allows you to go further back than before, but you're not going to be able to go back to its initial state. So be mindful of that. You're only going to be able to go back maybe 5 or 10 steps. So that's all for now. I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this tutorial helpful. Leave me a comment if you have any suggestions or any questions. I will have no problem answering them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you on the flip side.